Hi, my name is Alex Levitt. I'm the co-founder and CEO of Regal, and I'm here with Simon Lejeune, the VP of Growth at WealthSimple. Simon, thank you so much for joining us today.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Alex.
So, to start, you've obviously found a seat on the rocket ship. So tell us maybe a little bit about your background and, what got you to where you are today.
Yeah, I work at WealthSimple currently, the largest fintech in Canada. I'm actually from Belgium. I grew up in Belgium and then I moved to Canada about 10 years ago and started to work for tech companies. But eventually, I saw also like a lot of other industries popping up and I decided to start my own thing, a little growth agency, Myland Growth, named after a neighborhood in Montreal where we were based. And then we took WealthSimple as a client, so my current employer, and eventually acqui-hired our little group to become their growth team. And that's about 5 years ago now. So
So when
now
you
on that
started,
rocket ship.
what were assets under management then? And I know now you guys have just hit a new milestone.
Yeah, we were at around probably 5 billion in assets, mostly in managed investing in portfolios. And we just announced that we hit an amazing milestone of $100 billion in assets, with half of that coming through in the past year. So
Yeah,
it's
that's the
kind of
craziest part. You guys have just
exactly.
accelerated. So what changed in the last year? What's led to, all this growth?
I think like in the financial space, trust is paramount, right? Like you're literally holding your clients' money, especially in Canada. In the US, I think people are a little they love the risk. In Canada, it's a little more risk averse, more thoughtful
Yeah.
sometimes. But so we're seeing the compound impact of just being in the market for so long and building an amazing brand that people love and feel connected to. So you have that organic growth. And then the last thing that has been clicking for the past 2 years has been on the growth side, where we sort of shifted from being super hyper focused on growing the number of clients using WealthSimple and started to focus on like talking to these clients and try to get them to move their assets over to WealthSimple. And we unlocked a lot of growth through incentive campaigns and promotions. I like to tell my team and the board or the leadership team of WealthSimple, like what I like the most is giving my clients money. And
Yeah.
instead of paying Google and Facebook to convince someone to move over to WealthSimple, I can pay you directly, give you a little incentive and carrot. Because our brand and product are so sticky, and usually we have great product market fit, people want to make the move. But there's so much friction because you have to call your advisor, like maybe it's a friend of the family, you have to fill out a form. Adding that like reason or the why now you should move with these offers has been very successful, and customers seem to love us for these offers.
I love the point that you made that so much of the success is due to building trust with the customer and actually talking with your customer. You guys have really, I think, leaned in on lots of innovative sales and marketing strategies.
Mhm.
How have you started using talking with the customer to help you guys grow?
The client is very important to us, obviously, and every business is like, the client, the client, the client. Our number one value at the business, and it's very clear, is literally the client, the client, the client. And we're trying to be as client as obsessed as possible. The Amazon culture has been around that, like, how do you make it cheaper? How do you make it faster? And how do you constantly listen to the customer? And Mike Katchen, our CEO, like really embodies that value. And to give you an example, like the first, I don't know, maybe first 1,000 clients to WealthSimple, he was personally calling every client to welcome them to WealthSimple. I was onboarded as a client to WealthSimple because I saw Mike doing, he had this little briefcase and was doing all the lunch and learns. He had, I don't know, like probably top clients of Uber Eats in Toronto and Montreal
Mm-hmm.
that year. But eventually you scale to millions of customers, and that's not sustainable. And I'm going to tell you and explain to you how we got back into it. It started with these offers we were making to customers, and we're asking like a few questions before they participating on the promotions. And usually, one of the question is, how much money would you like to bring over to Wealthsimple so we can provide the right level of support for your transfers. Account transfers are super complicated. Sometimes they fail. So if you have like 6 accounts, we might just get on a call and help you fill out the paperwork, make sure you don't miss anything. So we make sure those account transfers go smoothly. And so because those transfers were fairly large, like we would pick, okay, anyone who wants to move over 100,000 or 200,000 or whatever based on the campaign, we're going to go on a call and see if we can make a difference by being on a call. And it's a bit unusual because in B2B, it makes a lot of sense to have a sales team, BDRs, whatever, SDRs, all the nomenclature. But in B2C, not really, unless you can select potentially the largest clients where it does make sense from a return on investment perspective to call a bunch of them and trying to help them and assist them with their transfers. And so that's when we started to hire a few more people. We call them BDRs, business development reps. Usually they're coming from our CS org. So it's awesome to see the best, customer support people turn into, find like a new career into sales because of that role. So that was awesome. And then seeing like, it makes enough of a difference that you can justify scaling it. But then we still had the challenge of like, what if like I'm just starting with investing and I have a $10,000 account and lead qualification, etc. We can't really justify the cost of calling everyone who is starting with investing, but sometimes they need it the most, right? Like because they do have a lot of questions. Do you support this account type? They also don't really trust. Like is there a phone number that I can call? And so that's like the transfer use case, which is very transactional. But there's also a ton of other use cases. And the number one being just onboarding with WealthSimple. Hey, I'm signing up. Here's my info. I want to try this. And we get thousands of those every day. And so that's how we started to look into the AI use case to, being able to serve those customers as well as possible, and started
Yeah.
to explore a few tools, and then eventually started to work together with you guys.
You guys started with humans and financial services. One thing that's interesting we've seen across the board is particularly in the sort of newer people, they have a lot of questions and they're ashamed to ask. But when it's an AI, like they're happy to engage with the AI and have a long conversation and ask these questions. People feel like they're stupid if they don't know the answer, but that's not right. They're not stupid. They just haven't had the opportunity to go ask these things. So as you've started using AI agents, like what are the typical things customers are doing with the AI agent? Like how has it impacted the onboarding process?
One of our focus at WealthSimple, or you see platforms like Robinhood, is the democratization of finance and trying
Yeah.
to use technology to bring the product and level of service and support that a high net worth customer who gets it through private banking, and try to make that available to everyone, literally, even if you just get started. And AI is one way. We are also surveying those customers after they have conversation with AI as they onboard and say, hey, did you find that helpful? Did you find that weird? Like, how did that make it feel about WealthSimple? And you still see, I think audiences and buckets of customers who are a little surprised, and sometimes like a little, it can be concerning because there's also a bunch of, cybersecurity or attacks that can happen with AI. But what I found over the past few months is that behavior is going down less and less. And really interesting emerging behavior is that when clients understand that they're talking to an AI, they are actually now adapting their speech and trying to make it easier for the AI to understand or to answer. And I think that's because they've now been able to use maybe ChatGPT voice or Gemini or whatever else. And they understand like some of the limitations that the AI has, like, sometimes on the interruptions, it can be a little tricky, or you have to articulate as well as you can to make sure they understand the keywords, etc. And so it's funny to see people change their behavior when they understand it's an AI. And so what we're seeing is what you said. People are, they're not worried to waste the AI's time is what I'm learning. And if they don't understand, it's like, can you repeat that? Can you repeat that? Can you explain that again? And we're trying to like not make it last too long because we want to be mindful of people's time. And so we say, try to not be too long in the prompts, and try to say thanks and just like terminate the conversation. But what we're seeing is like people are like, wait, I have another question. Don't hang up almost.
Yeah.
We're adapting to that. And yeah, they ask a ton of questions. We see like a group of people who have 30-45 minutes conversations, and they want to know everything about WealthSimple. They want to know everything about our products. So that's really, really interesting, but still kind of monitoring also the reaction and what is going to be the impact on our brand. But I feel like just the same way it felt weird to buy a $1,000 flight on the phone for the first few times, most people will feel more and more comfortable, I think, talking to an AI, and might even prefer talking to an AI where there is no background noise. You understand very clearly what the AI is saying. It has infinite patience, and you can call it back anytime of the day, night. Another behavior we did not expect is a lot of callbacks from our customers to the number they save. We now specifically tell our AI agent to we even say to prompt it like, hey, just save this number if you need it.
Yeah, I
Um,
love that behavior, by the way. It's like you used to do it when you found like a good plumber. Like, oh, I found a
yeah.
good plumber. I'm going to save his number in my phone. And now people are starting to do that with AI agents, to your point, because they're getting a level of service which is elevated and it's seen as a premium thing and they want to store it.
For us, it's also a matter of preference. And I think what we're also learning is like, because the behavior is still like a little bit two camps type
Mm.
of audience, like there's no reason to force people into one camp. And I think like one of the learning is like to offer the AI service, but also to allow clients to talk to a human if they want to. And I think that's where like on the technical side, the biggest challenge is going to be the handoff, right? And like, how do we and how do you staff enough people so they're ready to and they have the context that the AI can pass to the human, but not it's like, hey, this is an AI agent you're talking to, you prefer talking to a human, say it at any point in the conversation, and so everyone has like the service that they want. And
Yeah.
my guess is that you do that for now for a few more quarters, a couple of years max, and eventually you see that 90% of the time clients and people will rather speak to the AI.
There's two sort of intersecting things happening. On one side, the AI is getting better faster and faster. I think within 18 months, I think it'll be indistinguishable from a human. You won't know. Like literally, you will not know. We're not there today, but we're not far.
Mm-hmm,
And on
mm-hmm.
the other side, I think if you go and survey somebody, and we've done this, and you say, "Hey, do you want to talk to an automated?" They say, "No, God forbid!" Like because their impression of an automated agent is either an IVR or what they call an IVA, which is, "Hey, tell me what you'd like," and you say something, and it goes, "Oh, so you mean this?" You're like, "No, no, no, no." Press zero. Give me a human. So I think
Mm-hmm.
there's been such a history of terrible automation in voice that people are very
Yes.
biased against the idea.
Is there like a challenge with phones and phone lines where the experience and the quality of the sound and the latency when you talk to your phone, right, like to an app directly, is better than through phone lines where sound compression and other like technical limitations make it a little more challenging to get like the exact human experience that you'd expect?
Let's say a human agent in the Philippines, like there's latency that's added in that.
Mm-hmm.
So that's one. Two is currently on cell phone networks in the United States, it's not HD voice, it's just regular voice. And so it knocks out a lot of the intonation in voice, whether it's AI or a human. So
Mm-hmm.
if you think about those two things on latency, to give you an exact number, humans face to face, let's say talk in the 400 millisecond latency between your end of an utterance and my starting when we're not interrupting ourselves. A contact center agent, a human, let's say on the phone, is closer to 750 milliseconds, partly because they don't know exactly the answer and they're looking stuff up, and partly because of the telephony. AI agents, I think right now are in that 750 millisecond to 1 second range. So about what a contact center is, but it doesn't yet quite feel like the face-to-face conversation. So I
Mm-hmm.
think two things are going to change. One is HD voice is coming out on all the cell networks in the next 6 months. That'll give so much more fidelity. We actually have very good AI voices, but to your point, the sound is knocked out when we compress them. And then the second thing that's happening is more and more people are using basically VoIP calling, not normal like cell phone calling. And so that actually can allow us to make sure that we co-locate the AI agent as close as possible to the customer and there's as little latency as possible, and it never even goes through the phone network. So for
Mm-hmm.
instance, we can now do, so it just came out recently, we can now do calls on Apple FaceTime. So that's kind of
Right.
cool. So like you can do a FaceTime call or you can do a WebRTC call straight from the website. So those things
Mm-hmm.
like will continue to help for sure.
Technology can compound on like different levels where the AI is going to get better, the latency, but it's exciting to hear that even the phone lines are getting still like upgrades
Oh yeah, it's
to
crazy
HD
that
voice.
HD voice, the technology came out a while ago. It's just it's
Mm-hmm.
expensive for these carriers to go and upgrade everything, and so it's taken a little bit of time. But the sound quality difference when you test it is shocking. Like it is so much better. As you think now about what's next, perhaps for WealthSimple, what are the big challenges now for the company? Like what are you thinking about?
Our goal is to become the largest financial institution in Canada and beyond eventually. And so we are going to add a lot of product functionality. We're still not necessarily at par with the banks who have been around for 200 years in Canada. And so we still have a lot of product development to do. What I'm interested in, and without revealing too much of our future strategy, is to show up more in real life And I think eventually all the fintechs and the apps, the website, the online aspects of fintechs could reach some sort of ceiling where some clients are still not comfortable, moving over their life savings to one of these fintechs or apps. And I think like showing up in real life through different things, through spaces, through activations, through sponsorships, to try to break that ceiling and make people feel more comfortable that we're here to stay is going to be an interesting challenge for us, I think, over the coming years. So that's one thing, and keep growing our penetration in Canada.
Like every company, you have a website, you have an
Mm-hmm.
app, you have social media, and you're starting to learn about AI agents. Like, fast forward 3 years, 5 years, how important do you think AI agents will be to that interaction with the customer?
Super important. So I think like it's hard to guess where it's going because it's changing so fast, right? And it's hard to guess like what habits customers are going to form over time, and how comfortable they are with something today doesn't mean, is not necessarily a great indicator with what they're going to be comfortable with in the future. And so I think what is really important is to stay up to date, be really on the edge, and test a lot of things so that when you start seeing those habits form and when you start seeing the trend a little more clearly, you're ready to go and like ready to beat your competitors. One thing I have in mind, right? Like that's just like my personal point of view, not something necessarily we're actively discussing or I've heard anyone discuss, but I love the concept of ChatGPT apps. And I think there is a debate potentially in the future around AI where do you bring, let's take the example of Hopper. Do you bring the AI into the Hopper app where you open Hopper and you say, hey, go and book me a hotel in 3 stars in Vegas for next week. And then, it goes and do that. Or do you go in ChatGPT and to just use that interface and just like do everything from there as your base
Mm,
app, right? And for flights, like travel is always the example, but it's a terrible example because I want to see the rooms, I want to like see the flights,
mm,
etc. So you need like visual confirmation. But now you're thinking about a fintech app, personally, I'll say it again, personally, I'd rather maybe go to ChatGPT and say, hey, Chat, can you just like my paycheck just came in. I got a notification. Can you go and pay my credit card? Send $1,000 to my sister because I need to reimburse
mm,
her, and take whatever is left and put it into the SPY index from my non-registered account.
mm,
And I could go and do that in the WealthSimple app, and it was going to take me 20 clicks. Or I can go and ask the agent and probably ChatGPT that I trust or anything else to do it. And I think, when I talk about this with other people, they're like, well, I'm never going to trust ChatGPT with like, go and buy some stock for me. And that just makes me feel like, what I was hearing, which was like, I will never buy, a $2,000 flight on a phone. And
yeah,
no, you will. And you will
yeah,
trust ChatGPT. And I think like, for the first 10 times, it's going to give you a prompt, confirm, confirm, confirm. And some actions like, I think like we're going to need to change the legislation around finance because a lot of the actions require a human confirmation or require a human in the loop by law, but it's going to slow down the innovation massively. But I feel like after a few times, I'm going to be tired of confirming, and when I see it 10 times in a row it works, that's just how I want to interact and manage my finances. And then
yeah,
still like keep the app probably if I want to go and browse and see, but for actions. And then from our side, we'll need to build, I guess, the correct connections
yeah,
for the agents to be able to take action into our app. I think right now it's interesting because the most avid consumer of AI are probably developers, right? With Cursor and other tools. And developers, what they're really, really good at is asking for context, or being very specific about their ask, because they can't call a variable something and then another one the same thing. Like they think a little bit in like logic and math, and need to be very specific. But when you're going to ask someone who's not in software development, you can't just say go and buy me this stock, because you have to say what account, how much, what type of
mm,
order. So if you're a little savvy, you're going to say go and buy me this stock in my non-registered account with a limit order that's like 2% above the
mm,
current price or whatever. It's still too complicated, right? So most people are going to say, go buy me the stock, and then you'll need the agent to refine the query, and the app to like give enough context to the AI so the AI can ask like the questions that it needs to ask to know what to do. I think it's going to create like a big gap between the apps that are able to build those connections as quickly as possible versus legacy, potentially like, old banks. Imagine how long that's going to potentially take. Maybe some of them will surprise us, and maybe some smaller companies are going to move super fast into that space. But at WealthSimple, like we want to make sure no one is going to do to us what we've been able to do to the bank so far. And so
Yeah.
we're definitely at the forefront of that trend.
If you have an AI agent that just connects anything, it's just answering FAQ, it's not that helpful. Like the two systems that we really deeply integrate into, one is company CRM, whatever form that may take, so we
Mm-hmm.
can personalize the conversation. And the other piece is what we call, action. So like the APIs they have to dispute or to add a trade or to sell something or whatever it may be. And I think the companies that are accelerating their ability to externalize that either through MCP or through APIs are going to be much more successful because the agents can take those actions. If you're not accelerating that work, it's going to be really hard. It's just a question of like what is your organization's commitment to externalizing these APIs for AI agents?
I think it starts by creating a culture that is going to reward your people to use AI, to get interested in AI. And so we have our little AI days in my team where people just go
Yeah.
off and make some games. Or I'm obsessed with Replit right now. I don't know if you saw, they dropped
Mm-hmm.
Replit design yesterday. You can make a lot of like small tools. So everyone in my team now feels like a small developer,
Yeah.
and with tools like like yours, like Regal, like Braze, that gives us the freedom to do a bit of development inside of them. AI has been an amazing enabler to create like super cool journeys, or you know things that where our end user can actually interact within the app, like little timers, or you can flip the coin in the app right now for a giveaway, and then it gives you a pop-up that says you got like 100 entries in the giveaway, little Easter eggs. Nothing like
Yeah.
core functionality necessarily, right? But yeah.
I remember when somebody came in and said they didn't know how to Google. I go, well, you can't do this job if you don't know how to Google. So if
Yeah.
you don't know how to use the new version of enterprise software, which is AI building AI, you're not
Hmm.
going to be able to do the job.
Instead of like closing the gap, which it could do between people, I'm worried sometimes that it can increase the gap, because you see the people are super curious and passionate who love to learn new things. They become like Superman, right? Like they have superpowers with AI,
Yeah.
and the people don't necessarily are not necessarily curious about technology, and it's fine. Like you come in, you can do an amazing work and not be obsessed with AI in your after work. But that can create like and widen the gap. And I've seen like intern in my team, like moving at speed of light, and like surpassing people's capabilities who have been like with us for a few years, right? Like, so that's really interesting and scary also in some ways. The challenge for me now, like in this paradigm where you can do anything, the challenge becomes like, well, what do you do next? And
Hmm.
like, how do you prioritize, and how do you curate actually what you want to do? Because yeah, we can launch a campaign every other day now, or like every other week maybe, because it's so fast to build and launch something. But the bottleneck becomes your client's attention at some point, right? Like you can't just like launch a million things all the time, and your added value becomes like potentially your taste, right? Like, which is bit of the buzzword in AI, and then trying to say, yeah, this is what I want to do. This is good. This is bad, and here's the order in which we're going to do things.
Yeah.
Matters
I
more
think
than
that's
like
a
how we're going to execute them.
Yeah, I think that's a good place for us to stop today. So to your point, there's a lot of opportunity. So, if anybody wants to become a new WealthSimple customer, go to wealthsimple.com and you'll get an opportunity to onboard perhaps with an AI agent as well from Regal. Simon, thank you so much for doing this today.
Yeah, thanks, Alex, and thanks for being an amazing partner through us figuring out how to leverage this new technology.
Of course.